Well, another day and another Championship manager special as after Swansea yesterday, bringing a familiar face back to the club. This time, Plymouth Argyle have replaced the departing Steven Schumacher with Ian Foster, who returns to English football after a spell in Saudi Arabia. But first, as we always do, let's have a look back at the old man, because this is a bit different to most manager specials. It is not a man who was failing, who was sacked from the club, or who the club wanted out. It was a man who had a great bond and affection with the club because, let's be honest, Steven Schumacher did a remarkable job at Plymouth Argyle, taking over from Ryan Lowe, who left in very similar circumstances for a championship team. A lot of Plymouth fans at that time, when we did that Preston manager special, said, don't worry, Schumacher is the glue holding this together and we'll be absolutely fine. And you know what? You're a knowledgeable fan base because you're all spot on. A 53% win rate almost if we're rounding up. 57 wins from 108 games. League One champions last year, which when you consider the sides in the division is remarkable. EFL trophy runner-up, manager of the season in League One, and multiple manager of the month awards. He did a phenomenal job. They didn't just come up, they didn't just win the league, they were exciting to watch, they were threatening in front of goal. And this season, they've been very much the same because we've talked about it in the championship predictions each week when going for the scorelines is, at home, Plymouth and Ipswich have been the two highest scorers in the division. The two sides that came up from League One, they've kept a genuine no-fear approach and they've managed to create and score plenty of goals. However, there has been problems defensively, and of course we know for a new man coming in, Plymouth's away record is something that if you are going to look to improve, will need to be addressed. We should also mention the caretaker stint as well because 3 draws out of 4, and although they were battered by Southampton, a little bit unfortunate result-wise because a perfectly good goal was ruled out, which would have made it 1-0. But overall, if we go back to Steven Schumacher's spell, well, of course there's frustration he's leaving, and we saw a few of them when we did the Stoke manager special about Schumacher. You've got to understand this, and it will be the same for Foster as well. For any manager who was a player previously at the lower levels and has not earned that 5-figure-a-week salary at the top end of English football, maybe even a 6-figure one in some cases, they're always going to have that first opportunity managerial-wise to go and get a contract that secures their life. And for Steven Schumacher at Stoke, we had it with Nathan Jones a few years earlier. Unfortunately, that is the case, and no manager realistically can turn it down. Even if not from a career point of view, they can't turn it down from a financial point of view. They've got to look after their family, and I'm sure most sensible fans understand that. He has had an unbeaten start at Stoke, which you can find that manager special up there. And of course, Plymouth have been plodding on okay without him. They're 7 points clear of the relegation zone. They've got a few very big games coming up, and a very different run of fixtures to what we mentioned with Luke Williams at Swansea yesterday, even though those two will be colliding soon. So let's move on to the new man that will be head coach for that game against them, because it is Ian Foster who is the new head coach of Plymouth Argyle. Let's have a look at some of the key bits of the statement. The 47-year-old is widely regarded as one of the brightest coaches in England, and prior to moving to the Middle East, worked for the Football Association across a variety of age groups. He worked as a coach for the World Cup winning England under-17 side, under Steve Cooper, and alongside a current Plymouth player in Lewis Gibson, before going on to manage the under-18s, 19s, 20s, and being assistant to Phil Neville for the women's team. He also had a spell with Paul Cook at Pompey in their title-winning season, and he has played in the lower leagues of English football for the likes of Hereford, Kidderminster and Chester across League Two and the National Leagues. So very clear that he's got that pedigree of coaching within the FA, something we've seen with quite a few coaches in recent years coming into English football and certainly in the Championship. And I think one of the things you'd be fair to say, looking at both the chairman and director of football's comments, is that it was about taking the time to find the right fit for the club. And we know Plymouth, and I go back to my club Luton again, run sustainably, work in a slightly different model. And they were always going to go for a coach who fit their philosophy, who they know that if Plymouth have a player who they develop and becomes a star, will be sold on for however many millions, and then they'll develop the next one. They'll bring in young players from further down the EFL or who need a second chance after being released from Premier League clubs. We know the model, and while they have a few bits of experience dotted around the squad, we know what Plymouth are going to do, and it's a good model that has worked very well, and they're an incredibly well-run football club off the pitch, as has been proven by the fact that the recent managerial changes in other times have not affected them at all, really. If anything, the Schumacher one had a positive effect. But let's talk about Ian Foster and what we can expect, because He's obviously someone who's got no senior managerial experience outside of the Republic of Ireland, and those spells were a number of years ago. And actually, quite similar to Luke Williams, who we mentioned at Swansea yesterday, had a couple of managerial stints very young. With Williams, it was Swindon. Here, it was Galway and Dundalk for Ian Foster. Then went away and worked under people before developing and coming back stronger. Now, of course, the difference is that Foster has been an FA man. He's been going through that pathway. And we've seen recently managers have incredible success that way. We've seen Steve Cooper. We've seen Rob Edwards at my club. We've seen the likes of Joe Edwards going at Millwall recently, who's in that model as well. So it is definitely a developing trend for coaches. And of course, it means they've worked with a lot of good young English players. And that means Foster will know Lewis Gibson pretty well. He did have a good record with the England youth squads, but you would expect them to win most games. And his other two managerial stints in Ireland were so long ago, he was in his mid-30s, is probably not worth judging too much. But one of the things I find pretty interesting with him is that he's got a bit of a mixed experience of the sort of people he's worked with, because you'd argue working with Gerrard at El Ittifaq this season, working with Phil Neville for the senior women's team with England. He's been with a couple of managers who have had pretty disastrous stints, let's be honest. But he's also worked with people like Steve Cooper and Paul Cook that have had incredible success. And of course, he's managed a youth team to a European Championship success, which is no mean feat even at youth level. We know they've trotted out the line about him being involved in the development of so many of England's first team players now, but of course that's natural if you're in that pathway. What can we expect in football style? Well, probably pretty similar. They like to be front-footed, his sides, albeit with England you would expect that was going to be the case at youth level. But you generally see attacking sides. You generally see, rather than just the slow, methodical possession, we do see a bit more of quick, wide counter-attacking play. And that's something that's been absolutely crucial to Plymouth's play this season, particularly at home. The way they can get through the pitch and through the thirds is so impressive. And it's the thing that's made them in Ipswich so frightening at home, despite the fact they're new to the division. Of course, on the flip side of that, if they do want to have success in the long term, Plymouth are going to have to find a way away from home to be a little bit less porous, because this season, I think open is the perfect way to describe their away form. It's been fine at home because, of course, they can outscore teams and in many cases they can be competitive throughout. But away from home, they've often looked like conceding a lot of goals, and in many of those instances, they have been beaten pretty comfortably. We also know on the road that there's a problem at the other end of the pitch as well, because this season, Plymouth are the third lowest scorers away from home, despite the fact, as we mentioned, they've got 33, the joint best record at home park. And that's something, again, it's about finding a balance on the road. And in the first season at the Championship, if you can keep a top 6 home record, you've always got a great chance of doing well. I go back to Reading last year. I know they had a points deduction in there as well, but once that home form dried up a little bit, it all started to go a bit wrong. Because if you become so reliant on getting results in one place, eventually it can come crashing down. But I think we're going to start to see a little bit more balance there. And of course, we are at the start of a transfer window, which allows for that too. But Plymouth might not be looking forward to this transfer window, because Morgan Whittaker is being linked with pretty much every club in the Championship and the bottom end of the Premier League. He's a very talented young player. He's had a wonderful season so far. And of course, in addition to losing Finn Azaz, who'd been an ever-present this season, and again one of the key goal threats, he's now gone to Championship rivals Middlesbrough on loan from Aston Villa. It makes it very difficult for Plymouth to compete continuously. So I think they're going to naturally be one or two reinforcements in attacking areas, because they have lost talent already. But Ian Foster is someone who will have contacts with English youth players and players who are going to be potentially quite useful at Championship level. So with the director of football model at Plymouth, I don't think we're worried about recruitment, because we can trust them to get the right people in and run the club sustainably. But it is going to be a challenge nonetheless, because losing one of your star players just before you come in, potentially losing another one during the window if the bid's silly enough, it is going to make it risky for Plymouth. And as one of only two sides not to pick up an away win this year, they're going to need to keep that goal threat at home as things stand. But if we go on and have a look at the fixtures coming up, it's very different to the start Luke Williams has got at Swansea. Yes, they meet in a fourth league game for both of them, but before then, Plymouth have got some very big games down there, because if you have a look at the Championship table, they face Huddersfield away from home after the FA Cup tie this week. And if Huddersfield win that, the gap is down to 1 point, and it does start to make things a little bit nervy. They then face Cardiff City, who haven't been in as good a form recently. And again, looking at the Championship table, it's an 8-point gap. If Plymouth can win both of those, you start to look very differently at the table. Then it's a trickier spell with the likes of West Brom, Sunderland and Coventry all chasing the playoffs. Of course, that Swansea game in the middle there. And as we mentioned yesterday, Swansea will be targeting that game because they're facing all of the top 7 in between. Then you look at Leeds, Borough, Ipswich. It's a horrible run of games there. But then it's the relief for Ian Foster because the running isn't too bad. If you look at the last sort of 13 games of the season, you've got Sheffield Wednesday, you've got Preston, who, of course, Plymouth will want to beat with Ryan Lowe in charge, if he still is by then. They've got the likes of Rotherham, QPR, Stoke, Millwall, all of those sides in and around the bottom 3. And it's going to be a really crucial run-in for them. So if you can pick up points in the next 2 months and have them comfortably safe, then you never know, they might be able to go on a bit of a run by then. But for me, there's a couple of key areas for Plymouth here. The first one is about shutting up shop because at home, yes, they have been brilliant in front of goal, but they've also got the 3rd worst defensive record. And away from home, it's about finding a way to score goals. Because, I mean, even look at the games with interim management. A 2-3 all draws, a 2-all draw. The last game for Schumacher was a 3-2 win against 10 men. It's been a bonkers spell of football. And while it's thrilling to watch, it's really exciting. And as a neutral, I really enjoy when there's a Plymouth game on TV. It's an exciting one to watch normally. I'm not sure that beyond this season, where I think they'll be all right, it's going to be the long-term recipe for success at the club. So I don't think it's going to be a spectacular end to the season for Plymouth in terms of results. I think they are still going to be on the outskirts of a relegation battle, purely because losing a key player already, if Morgan Whittaker goes, that's going to be crucial. But hopefully they can hold on to him till the summer. But looking at the next set of fixtures, the first couple of months for me are crucial because if the rot sets in and then you get to those relegation 6-pointers, it could become pretty tricky. Whereas if you can keep a comfortable distance, if you can get results in those Huddersfield, Cardiff games, and the Swansea game as well, then maybe you can start to look upwards. But again, a lot of those games, the more winnable ones are away from home, which does make it tricky for Plymouth because they just don't win away games. So I'm interested to see how this one pans out. The normal question we ask at the end is whether this will be a success and whether they'll see out their contract. But actually, the length of contract in the official statement has not been mentioned, though they do talk about their 5-year mission. So you'd imagine it's a long-term deal. We're still waiting for a few details of the backroom staff, which could, of course, change our opinion here. I would imagine at least one experienced person will come in alongside him, and then a couple of other young coaches as well. But looking at his spell, we don't really know what to expect. We mentioned this with Joe Edwards. We've mentioned it with a couple of others coming into their first job. You can never be sure what you're going to get. The biggest step up to a senior head coach is man management. And that's the thing that won't have been tested quite so much because when you're working within youth setups and just having players for a little camp, when you're working as an assistant and you're not really in charge of the players, you never know how that person's going to step up. We've seen it at Luton in different ways. Nathan Jones had an unbelievable effect. Graham Jones had the opposite effect and didn't really manage players well, despite being a great coach. So you don't know what you're going to get on that front. But in terms of the background, he's definitely worked with some good people. His style of football should be fairly entertaining and fit with the Plymouth mould. They were never going to go and be a playoff contender this year because the way the club is run, they're going to build sustainably. And there's a lot of similarities to the way my club's run. So definitely big plaudits for that. I do think Plymouth will stay up because I think there's some poor sides down there. Of course, there's got to be an element of caution because there's sides like Sheffield Wednesday who are flying now. Birmingham have realised their mistake just in time. And Stoke, obviously next to them in the table, have moved for Plymouth's manager for a reason. However, I do think they'll stay up, despite the fact I still think it will be fairly tight as I did in pre-season. I'm pretty sure I predicted Plymouth 20th or 21st, but I think they'll stay up. I'll be honest, I know I shouldn't be biased here, but I kind of do hope they stay up because they're a good, well-run club. And people don't realise the size of the club down there either. But what do you think? My view's not important. Plymouth fans, how does this appointment make you feel? Are you underwhelmed, overwhelmed? Are you happy? And do you trust the club to get it right again? Of course, a bit different to your last appointment in that it's had to come from outside the club, but are you confident that Ian Foster is going to be a success? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and if you did enjoy this video, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. If you want to stay up to date with everything else on the channel, you can subscribe and turn the notification bell on. We'll be back next week with Championship predictions and Premier League ones too, in addition to what I expect will be an imminent Birmingham manager special yet again. We've got the Swansea one and the Stoke one up in the eye above if you want to see what we said about Schumacher and Williams. And you can also see tomorrow a full extended preview of AFCON 2023. It's always a tournament we love previewing, so hopefully you'll come along and watch that one as well. But thank you very much for watching here. We do appreciate it. Enjoy your FA Cup third round weekend, and we'll see you back here in the middle of next week as the Championship predictions return for matchday 27.